So a couple of days ago, the Las Vegas Raiders superstar pass rusher Maxx Crosby put out a podcast in which he was responding to something that Myles Garrett had said. And within what he was essentially saying, ultimately responding to Myles Garrett, he basically put it out there that he's kind of unhappy too with where the Raiders are. And although at the time when I first heard it, I didn't think much of it. The more people are talking about it, the more I realize that there's a real chance that Maxx Crosby does not finish his career with the Raiders. And there's a real chance that it could even come down to within the next season or two that Maxx Crosby is actually moved away from the Las Vegas Raiders if the Raiders are not able to have success. So Myles Garrett last Friday actually was asked a couple of questions by the media. And within that, when he was asked, he basically said that, I want the Cleveland Browns to have success. I want them to win a Super Bowl. And I want to be the guy that helps them kind of get that. But, I'm 10 years into my career and it has not happened yet. Right? I've been here for such a long time. I've given it everything I have and it's still not where we should be, right? Like we're not in the race to win a Super Bowl. And Maxx Crosby was essentially responding to that saying like, I kind of went through the same exact thing. Every year it's every other year it's coaches are being changed out. One year we're coming in and we have these, we have a great defensive line and then next thing you know, these guys are gone. And he just went into it. And I want you guys to listen into what he had to say, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Years of inconsistency, you know what I mean? It's new coaches every other year and this and this and that and new teammates. And there's been plenty of times where I'm like, damn, like this D-line is cold. And then I come back and every single one of them's gone. You know what I mean? And it's like, what the you know what I mean? And then it just, there's on and on and on. There's a lot of things. So it's just like, it's tough, bro. Because I feel for Myles because he's in that same boat. You know what I mean? Like my contract situation, like I have no more guaranteed money. There's a lot of different things. Like obviously, there's gonna be a lot of things that need to be talked about, and I'm looking forward to those conversations. So, yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Like I'm really looking forward to this offseason, the process, and I will say, like on top of it, like the Raider fans have been dope and I love them to death. Like that's one thing through everything. Like the fans have truly since day one, like embraced me and being in their corner. And I think it's been the dopest shit. Like even with my injuries and all the shit, like the support has been like the coolest shit ever. And so, yeah, there's so many different things that got to be talked about. So it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
So obviously Maxx Crosby said what you guys just heard, but he said a lot more. And I highly suggest you guys go check out Maxx Crosby's podcast and definitely go check out the entire segment. Because you can definitely tell that Maxx Crosby wants to win. He wants to win with the Raiders, right, if that's possible. But we also have to realize that, the Raiders for the last 20 years have mostly sucked, right? It is what it is. And I know Maxx Crosby's trying to fix it, but there's just issues with the Raiders that I feel like you just can't fix it at times, right? And some people have talked about it was Al Davis at some point, and now it's Mark Davis. He's a bad owner. He doesn't really know what he's doing. The thing with the Raiders is we haven't really fixed what I think the bigger issue is. And, maybe it does get fixed, right? Maybe it does get fixed with Tom Telesco as the general manager. But if you guys just go back, right, the Raiders had hired Reggie McKenzie years back. McKenzie did a pretty good job, right? He had the Raiders on the right path. After moving off of Dennis Allen, the Raiders brought in Jack Del Rio. We were on the right path. And then Mark Davis essentially made another adjustment. And he decided that what the Raiders were doing at that moment was not what he wanted. And not only did he fire, he didn't even fire, I guess, at that point, but he decided to make the change away from Reggie McKenzie, right? He decided that, hey, I want to go with John Gruden, and John Gruden wants all this power. He wants a 10-year contract, which means Reggie McKenzie's not going to be here because John Gruden wants to make those decisions. So although they didn't fire Reggie McKenzie right away, they waited a year after Jack Del Rio got fired to ultimately fire Reggie McKenzie. The Raiders have not been consistent, right? It's just been inconsistencies. Because after the John Gruden era, we went to the Dave Ziegler era, Josh McDaniels, and we made another shift away from that. Multiple head coaches have changed, general managers have changed, and there's just not enough consistency. And I think the one thing the Raiders could do going forward is we could let Tom Telesco build this out for, 5-6 years. Let's see what this guy can do over the next 5-6 years. And just let it be consistent, right? Let this guy go out and actually do it. And that could give the Raiders a realistic shot of actually winning. But when you think about what Maxx Crosby's saying, right? He's and he didn't say it in those clips, but he talked about it in the actual entire segment about how he gets up right at 5 a.m. every single day. People don't know, right? The effort he puts into it. He talked about how he gives it everything he has. And, at the end of the day, he wants to win, and that's not happening right now. Right. And he went out and said, people love to talk about me getting traded. And that's the reality. Right. I've earned that right to be in, and it's just interesting everything he ultimately said about him potentially being moved off of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, do I think it's actually going to happen? Probably not. He obviously also threw it in there that there will be some sort of contract negotiations this offseason. He put it out there that there's no guaranteed money, and I actually looked at Maxx Crosby's contract, and there is actually nothing guaranteed in 2025 and 2026. And it's actually kind of interesting because his initial contract that he had actually didn't even include that much guaranteed money, which is kind of surprising to see that. And although the Raiders are not going to ever move off of Maxx Crosby, at least they wouldn't make that decision first. As of 2025, the Raiders can basically get out of Maxx Crosby's contract. Right? If the Raiders really wanted to move Maxx Crosby, they can. Right? Now, I'm not saying that I would do that if I'm the Raiders. In fact, I think the Raiders should actually renegotiate Maxx Crosby's contract, and they got to make him, truly, truly happy, because what's going to end up happening is, Nick Bosa got $34-35 million a year. We're going to see Michael Parsons break those numbers as well, if not get right up, right there as well. And Maxx Crosby's contract over the next 2 years is at like $26 million. That doesn't make sense, right? So not only are we going to have to give him a raise for the next 2 years, we'll have to extend him beyond that. Plus, we'll have to give him a lot of guaranteed money. And I also think that's part of why Mark Davis is selling parts of the team, right? I think Mark Davis understands that for him to keep guys like Maxx Crosby around, he's going to have to not only give him more guaranteed money, but even go beyond that. He's going to have to, give out guaranteed money to these other guys. The Merrigs, the Nate Hobbs. You're going to have guys over the next couple of years, even beyond that, right? Guys that are actually having success. Jackson Powers-Johnson, Brock Bowers, although that's a couple of years down the line. You're going to have to pay a lot of these guys. You're going to have to give them a lot of guaranteed money. And I think Maxx Crosby's entire, segment of being unhappy and not being able to win and just not being able to have success, the inconsistencies really just comes down to his frustration he has with the Raiders. And, I feel for Maxx Crosby, because as a Raider fan over the last how many ever years it's been, it's frustrating rooting for this team, right? It's really, really, really frustrating. Because when the Raiders get close, they do things that just don't make sense, right? When the Raiders are almost at that point where they'll be able to have success, or even, making the logical decisions. And I want to take a step back here. There's a way to actually have success and win long term, right? There's a legit path to be able to do that. It is not super difficult, right? Like other teams have done it. Since the Raiders drafted Derek Carr, the Chicago Bears have drafted, I believe, 4 quarterbacks in the first round, right? Since that time. And they finally hit on a quarterback. In fact, I believe 3 quarterbacks were like either the number, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe even Mitchell Trubisky was the number 1 overall pick. Maybe he wasn't the number 1 overall pick. But, they've invested in multiple quarterbacks, and they finally got to the point where they have a really, really solid quarterback. And teams do this. The New England Patriots have drafted 2 quarterbacks in the last 4 or 5 years in the first round, right? In order to have success, you got to invest those first round picks in the quarterback position. And the Raiders have it since 2014. That wasn't even a first round pick. Technically, it was a second round pick. But to get good, you got to get a quarterback, and that means you got to spend that first round pick on getting that position. But more than that, more than just getting a quarterback, you got to find a good coach. All right, and Jack Del Rio was a pretty solid coach for the Raiders. John Gruden was pretty solid as well. I think Josh McDaniels and Antonio Pierce were bad hires looking back at them. Maybe Antonio Pierce turns it around, but, at the end of the day, the best coaches call plays, right? They run an entire side of the football, offense or defense. And with AP, he unfortunately does not run either sides, right? He has an offensive coordinator that runs the offense. He has a defensive coordinator that runs the defense. So to me, if the Raiders want to have success, you got to get that coach, you got to get that quarterback, and you got to pair it up, right, in order to have success. And again, I feel for Maxx Crosby because, the Raiders haven't shown that they're willing to make those investments. They haven't shown us they're willing to do whatever it takes to become a really solid football team. But hopefully they do change that as we kind of go forward. Hopefully Tom Telesco is able to do the right thing with some of these draft picks. Hopefully we're able to get a quarterback this upcoming year. I know some people are saying if it's not Cam Ward at 1, it doesn't make sense to take another quarterback. I think even at pick 4 or 5, wherever you end up, if it's Shador Sanders is there, you take him. if even if Jalen Monroe or one of these other quarterbacks is there, maybe not in the first round, maybe take him in the second round. You got to get a quarterback that at least gives you potential, because Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, there's no hope in either of those two guys. Right? They're not good quarterbacks. You're not going to win long term with either of those two guys. And for them to have success, you got to get that quarterback position. Hopefully they get it right, and hopefully they take care of Maxx Crosby and they renegotiate that contract. And not only do they raise the cap, but they give him a little bit more guaranteed. If I'm a betting man, I think the Raiders will end up extending Max maybe another 2 years, right? So you'll have him in 2025, 2026, 2027, and 2028. You're essentially adding 2 years, and you're going to add more guaranteed money to his contract. I think it's what ultimately makes sense, and hopefully the Raiders are able to build it out. We'll see what ends up happening. I want to know what you guys think, man. Do you guys think Maxx Crosby being unhappy means, he might not be here with the Raiders? Obviously, I believe he's a Detroit Lions fan, and, we see the success the Lions are having, right? So I want to know what you guys think, man. What do you guys think on that? I've seen a lot of comments where when I posted those videos on Twitter, I saw a lot of people saying the Raiders should trade Maxx Crosby away. And I think that's kind of crazy, but I want to know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.